Well, I think if India reaches the 5 trillion mark, whichever year it is, I would imagine that South will not be just 1 trillion, because even now, the southern states together contribute close to 25 to 27%. So it ought to be much higher, and it can surely be much higher if that happens. I endorse all that Sangeeta has said, but let me make 3 points which are perhaps at a slightly higher level. One is that I'm not sure that we ought to be looking at South as being a separate engine of growth as compared to the rest of the country. I think we need to really look at holistically for the entire country to move forward. Southern states have certain advantages, certain strengths. Eastern states and western states have other strengths, but I think we need to look at something that encompasses the entire country, not have a southern strategy for $1 trillion. I think there must be a cadence of a $5 trillion strategy. The cadence comes down in several forms to different parts of the country. The second is that I think we have some comparative advantages. You talked about the IT, the strength of IT. If you stop and think about that, we had a comparative advantage of having a very large manpower resource with the right kind of qualifications to make a big change and a big impact on the global scene. And then on top of this comparative advantage, then you build several competitive advantages through innovations and so on, which is why IT made such a huge impact, both globally and for India. So if I take the same kind of a model and then say, what are the comparative advantages that South has on which we can hopefully look at building some competitive advantage, I would think service rather than even manufacturing should continue to be the focus. In the future, the next decade or two, service will have even a higher proportion of growth than manufacturing. Indeed, manufacturing is going through the 4.0, and most of manufacturing is going to be really service. And we're going to be talking about digitalization, more of robotization, more of IoT. A lot of that is service, and South is already becoming a big hub for SaaS. It's becoming a big hub for tech startups. So I don't see why that should not be the engine of growth. So you play to a comparative advantage of having, again, skilled manpower, people who have had this experience of having built businesses in this area, and then to scale up and become global. Similarly, you also have food processing. I mean, if agriculture is a very strong comparative advantage that the South has. So whether it's spices from Kerala or from Andhra, there's plenty that can be and should be done in order to make that into a global, impactful kind of engine. The third is, I think it is important to really be clear about whether we are talking about self-reliance towards this route or through an open economy. I can't think of one country that has looked at self-reliance as the way to move to a globally competitive economy. I'm told that self-reliance is competitiveness, which is a good thing, and that it's not self-reliance alone, it is competitiveness. And if that is so, then I think it's important that we look at where we can collaborate with the right kind of partners in the chosen areas in order to become globally impactful. Yeah. And 3 things are very quickly needed for that. One is certain protection of the local industry for a certain period of time. And more importantly, the neutralization of the cost disadvantage that we have through the PLI and so on. Lastly, enterprise. We need entrepreneurs. That's the critical thing.